Welcome everyone, Christine here with the final video on my best and worst legendary lords for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires for every single race. For the vampire counts is Manfred von Karstein. Now, Manfred is a particularly hated character in the Warhammer community, but that's not the reason he is here. First off, he has the worst starting position of all of them. I'm not saying that Vlad or Kemmler necessarily have a great starting position, but Manfred is in a far worse situation. He's got Forik to the east, and Forik is a complete powerhouse when playing against the AI. Because he's got so many benefits in his own army. It doesn't matter that his other armies are not that great, but his main army can defeat Doom stacks on his own. So he's a nasty bastard to deal with. Then you have Krokgar over there. You've got Tic-Tac-Toe to the southwest. And while Krokgar might leave you alone, Tic-Tac-Toe certainly will not. You've got Volkmar to the west. He'll certainly declare war on you. Cetra to the north. Skarbrand further to the north. Then Rapans and Arkhan. Now you do have good relations with Arkhan, but there's very few benefits in actually allying him when you can take your territory for yourself. Or I suppose you could decide to ally Arkhan the Black and give him some territory, or let him fight it out to Rapans, and you take the Great Desert of Arapi and the Cracked Land, potentially, in your campaign. Or you could just give the Cracked Land to Arkhan the Black, so you can hold your entire flank while you take Camry and everything else. But certainly this Thunderdome, the Thunderdome 2.0 as it has been called, is a really harsh starting position for any legendary lord. And Manfred in particular is obviously not liked by many of the legendary lords around him. With the exception, like his only friend is Arkhan the Black, and that makes sense from a lore perspective, but still. Now, the second reason why Arkhan is why Manfred is the worst legendary lord for the vampire counts is his faction effects. Well, he doesn't really have them. So he gets 20 diplomatic relations with the vampiric factions and followers of Nagash. Okay, that's good. It can help you out with confederations and the like, right? It can help you out getting good diplomatic relations with other vampiric factions. That's great. And you do get 20% research rate. But that's about it. Compared to the faction effects that other vampire counts legendary lords get, these are pathetic. The reason he gets such pathetic faction effects is because his faction effects, quote unquote, are the Books of Nagash. But many of the Books of Nagash aren't really that amazing unless you're talking about the very, very late game. If you take Castle Drakenhof and you get a good number of the Books of Nagash, then yes, you can get, for instance, you can get 2 hero capacity for that. 100% effectiveness commands. Okay, that's pretty sweet. Income from trade tariffs 30%. Okay. 10% upkeep. 2 local recruitment capacity, 20% recruitment cost. And that's assuming you get these books that are halfway around the world, and you have to actually take the settlements with military force in order to pick them up. And then you need to go all the way over here to take Castle Drakenhof and from Vlad, or confederate him, if that's even possible, confederate him, and then you can get that double effect. It actually gets worse than this. See, Manfred doesn't have a special skill line. I think he's actually the only legendary lord in the game that doesn't have it. His special skill line is that he gets 2 magic trees. Okay, he's a potent caster. I get it. He's got a lot of magical potential. Except the lore of death is not necessarily worth it. But the lore of vampires, okay. Right? He's the lore master of lore of vampires. Okay, let's look at the lore of vampires. He gets 2 winds of magic cost for Curse of Years, 2 for Wind of Death. Alright, that's not bad at all when you look at it. That isn't bad at all. And he also gets, as a lord effect, he gets plus 15 Winds of Magic power reserve, and minus 25% Graveguard and Black Knight upkeep. Now, I would still say that even for Manfred going down the melee skill line and using magic on heroes is still worth it. Yes, you do have some effects over here, but given the fact that you don't have a special skill line, you can certainly go into some magic and still get a lot of the melee skill line without too many issues. But not having a special skill line just limits his potential. Like Vlad, Isabella, and yes, Kemmler with Krell are just much better in their campaigns. They have easier starting positions. Let's not even talk about Gorst, how good he is. They have easier starting positions. They have better faction effects that aren't reliant on the damn books of on you traveling around the entire world, including invading Wolfwan just to assault the White Tower of Hoth. And by the way, assaulting the White Tower of Hoth, that will just cause a war between yourself and both Alariel and Tyrion. That's what's going to happen in 90% of campaigns on any high difficulties. They'll win the war there. They'll take over Safari. And it could be Alariel that takes over Safari. Could be Tyrion. By the way, they're going to be allied. So you going there and occupying the White Tower of Hoth, that's what it's going to do. The Books of Nagash are a pretty terrible mechanic. The fact that developers decided that when Manfred, his faction effects, and his lord effects would basically be the Books of Nagash, because that's exactly what they've decided to do over there, is not a great decision. It severely limits his potential as a legendary lord. It means he's only good in the very late game, and I don't care how good someone is in the very late game, because what it really means is you're starting like 10, 20 turns later than where everyone else is starting in your campaign. That's the problem with that kind of decision making. Like, oh, this legendary lord can be great in 20 turns. Okay, this legendary lord is great from turn 1. That's the case with Vlad. That's the case with Isabella. That's certainly the case with Gorst. And yes, that is the case with Kemmler. For Manfred, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't do a lot of things in this campaign. You absolutely can. The Vampire Counts still are one of the better races in the game, even if their auto-resolve absolutely sucks. But they're still one of the strongest races in the game. Good economy, good recruitment options. Raise Dead in particular is an amazing tool because it gives you access to very high tier units. I mean, imagine getting tier 4 units early on. Only like the Warriors of Chaos get that that kind of recruitment ability. And you don't have it as limited as they do. So there's a lot of power in a Vampire Counts campaign, but Manfred is still the worst. For the Warriors of Chaos, it is Vilitch the Curseling. Combination of factors, though I want to be very clear, every Warrior of Chaos Legendary Lord is pretty damn strong. Vilitch just drew the short straw in quite a few ways. Starting position, it's not great because you don't actually have a lot of territory that you can easily take over, which is actually kind of important for the Warriors of Chaos because they need the money, they need the vassals. The Great Bastion stands in your path. Sure, there is territory over here in Bloodwind Keep, Ironstorm, and of course Zaytan the Black, but you're going to be leaving your flank exposed to the Imperial Wardens, who are certainly going to build armies at the Great Bastion to try and stop you. And you can't just bypass the Great Bastion. And yes, the garrisons there can be quite formidable. Though you could potentially rush it, you just don't necessarily have the army to do so. That's the first thing to mention about Vilitch. The other thing to talk about is while he's certainly strong in terms of his special skill line over here, he can get barrier, warp flame attacks, casualty replenishment for Forsaken, and spawn of Siege. Those aren't really the units you want to focus on as the Warriors of Chaos. He gets Winds of Magic cost reduction for Treason of Siege. Changing Ways, minus 50% for Muddle Mines. Then Diplomatic Relations with Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, Beastmen, and Norska. Souls gained from own casualties. Yes, he is like that. Request Army cost minus 25%. Post-battle chance of stealing magic item. And research rate is increased by an additional 10% for steal technology, which you probably will never want to use. And then he has one item over here. That gives you the Vessel of Chaos, which replenishes barrier when you're casting spells. Vilitch may not die in a particular battle. He is that strong as a legendary lord. And then he steals 15% of experience earned by other lords. This is actually a negative trait as I see it, because while it certainly will allow Vilitch to get to a higher level, you're kind of going to screw your other lords, and Warhammer 3 is certainly all about getting as many armies as possible, even as the Warriors of Chaos. You do get the Twisted Twin ability, and the Teleport Stance usage cost, minus 25% wins of magic. Okay, but here's the reason why Vilitch is the worst legendary lord of the Warriors of Chaos. It's not his faction effects, it's not his starting position, it's not the enemies he has to deal with in the campaign. If that's the case, he would do actually quite well, all things considered. Because, yeah, while it is an absolute nightmare to bypass the Great Bastion, once you do so, Cathay is ripe for the taking. There's 2 Dark Fortresses in Nangao and in Weijin. Funny how 2 of the main cities of Cathay are Dark Fortresses, but okay. The issue is Siege itself. See, for the gifts, Warriors of Chaos are all really dependent on the Gifts of Chaos to gain their full faction potential. And the Siege Gifts of Chaos suck, pretty much. Like, sacrificing 10 control for 35% research rate is not worth a damn. Ever. Pretty certain that Warriors of Chaos can gain students, and even if they couldn't, it still wouldn't be worth it. But if they can, it's a completely meaningless benefit. There are some nice benefits, like the Arcane Wisdom over here for Warp Flame attacks, Arrows of Destiny for armies led by Siege devoted characters, though the range units of Siege do suck. But experience gain, okay. But the point I'm making is, the Gifts of Chaos at Siege are the worst ones. Slaanesh gets a major economic benefit, Nurgle gets a major growth benefit, Khorne gets a major post-battle benefit, and Undivided is the best of all of them, because you get missile resistance, for instance, as one of the starting ones. You can cause fear with Undivided units. You get unit experience for Undivided units. You get casualty replenishment for Chaos Marauder units, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits from Undivided. There's not really that many benefits for Siege. Even the units themselves, a lot of them aren't really that great. I mean, obviously, if we're thinking about Soul Grinders or Lords of Change, sure. But everything else, a lot of the other units are just not worth spending souls into. And there is the problem. For Vilitch the Curseling, that's the main reason he's the worst. Also, he's going to waste a lot of time in his campaign just because the Red Fortress starts so far to the east compared to any other settlement, so you're going to waste a lot of time just traversing terrain in this campaign. Finally, for the Wood Elves, it would have to be Drycha. Now, don't get me wrong on this subject. Drycha is an incredibly powerful Legendary Lord, but so are all the other Legendary Lords for the Wood Elves. It doesn't matter who we're talking about, be it Durfus, the Sisters, or Orion's unlimited army. Not that Orion himself is very strong. In fact, Orion is the weakest of the bunch, but his faction effects are so ridiculously overpowered that it doesn't matter how weak any of his individual armies are, because he has unlimited armies. That's how ridiculous Orion is. But here's the thing about Drycha. Yes, she gets frenzied, malevolent forest spirits. She can recruit them at tier 2. She starts with a tier 2 settlement. That is incredibly potent. She is far stronger than any other legendary lord around her. She easily wipes the floor with Vlad, Azag, etc. In fact, she's such a potent force that in every campaign for every legendary lord that surrounds her, my advice is, don't fight Drycha directly, win for attrition, take the Griffinwood, eliminate her unit recruitment, and then pray her army gets wiped out by someone else. And if it's not wiped out by you, just get into a position where you can auto-resolve against her, because having to fight her manually is an absolute nightmare. Drycha does get upkeep for Dryad, Treekin, and Treeman units. She gets a plus upkeep for Elf units, and Elf units are Glamoured. She also doesn't have all the Elf units in her roster. but none of that matters. She does start with 1 amber, which is incredibly powerful, actually, because she can unlock a lot of benefits. Like, she can get 15% upkeep for all Dryad Treekin and Treeman units. She can get 10 diplomatic relations with all factions. She can get a lot of growth. In fact, I would dare say the growth might actually be the best possible choice that you can go for if you're playing as Drycha. So there's a lot of benefits in her campaign. But all the other Wood Elves hate her. And I'm not just saying that they slightly dislike her. No, they despise her. And so you're going to end up in a situation where you have to wipe out Orion. You could potentially make the diplomacy game work, but really it's a lot of effort, and really screw Orion, he's not worth it. You have to wipe out Orion to take the Oak of Ages, because not having the Oak at the start is actually a significant campaign limitation. Because the Oak gives you faction-wide benefits once it starts getting to tier 2, tier 3. So you not starting with it puts you at a severe disadvantage in a campaign. It just means your campaign is overall going to be slower, because you still have to do the same objectives that all the other Wood Elf Legendary Lords do. Hell, you actually have to go over here and you have to conquer one way or another Alpha Lorem. You can confederate Durfu, that's not too big of a deal, but you will have to deal with all the other factions yourself one way or another. And then you might want to pay a visit to the Sisters of Twilight and put them in their place. So Drycha's campaign is incredibly potent in the early game, but it's one of those campaigns where the mid-late game is in a trouble spot. Don't get me wrong, it's still a campaign that works, and I would not say it's a terrible campaign. It's just the worst of the Wood Elves. That's the metric I'm going by. It's the worst campaign for this particular race, and the race in itself is very strong and filled with Legendary Lords that are incredibly good. She's just the worst of the bunch. And that is it. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time.